Hi guys, I am obsessed with thinking about thinking. My name is Amy Robinson and I'm here to share quantified curiosity. I am very curious how the ideas that I encounter and the new things that I discover integrate and infuse to form kind of who I am and who I will become. A stranger at a TED conference once walked up to me and said, "Hi, so what inspires you?" Besides actually making me think about what does inspire me, it made me think about how the things that inspire me change over time. You know, I am not a constant. I'm very dynamic, but it's hard to remember how I change and to keep it into perspective. So those 5 seconds consequently have mattered much more than just 5 seconds, and I wonder if the same is true for ideas. So I've been tracking them. I email myself interestingness, so when I look at, say, an article, when I write notes or watch a cool video, anything that makes me think, that's interesting, I email it to myself. And so for this talk, I've actually compiled 6 months worth of data into a pretty big spreadsheet. So each line is an idea, an entry, and the data has attributes like a date, a link, an engram, which is the subject and the body of the email. It's tagged with topics, and then it's also given an interestingness ranking of 1 being low and 5 being high. So 6 months worth of data came to 770 unique entries or ideas and 772 total topics. So once this data was kind of organized into a spreadsheet, I was able to analyze it and look at it in a completely new way. So this is a weighted graph of the most important topics. So of all the topics that were used at least 40 times and weighted either 4, which is the green bar for important, or 5, the blue bar for most important, they show up on this graph. And you can see, based on the importance, the most prevalent topics vary. For example, the green bar, most important, is journal, which is peer-reviewed literature, not my personal notes. Followed by biology and neuro, whereas if you look at the blue bars, notes, my personal notes come up first. And you can also look at these as entries over time. You can see that these are the most important entries, and they tend to occur in clusters. So I wondered, do these clusters actually correspond to something? There's a huge cluster in February, 14 items in 3 days. They actually corresponded to my starting a new side project. It's photos of notes. It's a Tumblr blog where I just publish pictures of my handwritten notes. So yes, in that case, that cluster was something real. And I wondered, is this true for the other clusters? It turns out, yes. In March, there's another one where 21 items occur in a period of 12 days. It corresponds to something kind of goofy that I do. It's life bonus emails. I send these out now quite periodically to my friends saying, share something beautiful, inspiring, intelligent, or entertaining that you've discovered in the past week. And if they complete this challenge, they get a hypothetical life bonus. It's goofy, it's fun, it rocks the inbox. But again, the data actually corresponds to my doing something new. But how else can we actually explore this? We were able to format these ideas into Gephi, which is a free network graphing program. Now, the way that this graph works, the circles are called nodes, and they correspond to the topics that are tagged with ideas. The size of the nodes indicate how many times they were used in tandem with other nodes. The edges, the lines between them, are the actual ideas that are co-tagged with the 2 different topics. You can run statistics in Gephi to modularize communities. So based on how connected groups of nodes are relative to the overall connectivity of the graph, you can isolate and see distinct communities. So for example, the blue down at the bottom is science and science-related tags. The purple is work/health. I work in health. You could probably actually infer that by looking at the graph. The red section is TED and TED-related tags, including TEDx and video. And then the green section was self. And there were some cool things in there, like playful, curious ideas and Cora that popped up really close to me. But this is messy. It's very hard to see 10,500 edges. So what you can do is you can actually isolate individual topics. The yellow dot there is the tag of ideas within all of my ideas data. And you can see there's a little green dot, sort of an outlier dot off to the side. And it exhibits high betweenness centrality. Now, in social network graphs that represent people, those nodes that have a high betweenness centrality are the ones that bridge gaps between very distinct communities. They're interdisciplinary in a way, and it made me wonder, could the same be true for ideas, those in-between ideas, and how can I decipher this information? So we could look at the graph of beautiful, for instance. You see there's a purple dot right in the middle. That's tech. And when I actually looked at these co-tags, there's a series of beautiful scientific technological videos that I've actually compiled on my blog at amyrobinson.me if you're curious to see them. You can also zoom in and look at these, these red sections that were closely tagged with with beautiful. So TED, TEDx, side project. I guess it's a good sign that the things I do for free in my spare time also incite a sense of beauty and awe. And video was the largest in that cluster. When I looked at the graph of video, it actually made me wonder how we could take this type of information and make it interactive. So imagine you were panning through this on a computer, and rather than just looking at nodes, you could actually look at the content. You could watch the videos relative to where they're tagged and other things. This is the tag for self. Again, yellow is self. A lot of this was intuitive, TED, science. I'm geeky, I love TED. But there was one dot that actually very much surprised me, closely related to me, a big green dot for Quora, Quora, the social Q&A network. And this is a graph of Quora. It's highly infused with all the different communities of my ideas. And so these are beautiful graphs. They're elegant and nice to look at. But what do they mean? What can you actually learn from exploring ideas in this type of way? It puts them into context. By being able to see my ideas and see the way that they're connected to each other, I'm able to think about myself in new ways. I'm able to see, rather than just the fact that I started a new blog or I send out a goofy, fun email to friends, I can see how that evolved and where it came about. And based on the features in these graphs, I can actually understand more about where my ideas come from and how they change over time. And there's a lot that can be done in Gephi that I haven't even gotten to. But really, like that one line at TED, those 5 seconds carried a much greater weight than just 5 seconds. I think that the same can be true of ideas. How do I remember what was new to me 4 years ago? How do I understand how the ideas that I'm encountering today are influencing me as a function of time? I really wonder how I can discover more ways to think about myself and how I can kind of explore how my mind looks relative to other people's. I wonder if there are hidden patterns inside of this. I don't know the answers to these questions, but I think that there are answers, or can be. I'm very curious to understand, who I am and how I exist. Consciousness is my greatest curiosity. And, in the end, I've learned that we need to think socially about how to better think about thinking. This was a momentous task to put all of this together, and it can be certainly done more efficiently. In the end, just remember, you are extraordinary. Your mind is exquisite. The things that you think about and the things that are important to you create who you are and who you will become. So imagine how you might answer the question, what inspires you, if you had a quantified mind in your cognitive toolkit. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start and invite you to ask questions. I have a really practical question. How do you consume the material that you're arranging in terms of the archive of your thoughts and ideas? How do you interact with it?
You mean like the Gephi, the graphs?
Yeah, like what do you do? Like how do you, for instance, we had a great talk for somebody who kept an idea journal and talked about keeping track of ideas as a form of self-creation and really changing himself based on, but he goes back and he reads the journal and he has a very, on a certain day, he goes back and reads a certain number of entries. So that's one very simple way to do it. What's your way of using what you're collecting to then influence yourself in the present or in the future?
Yeah, so in the graphs that you saw, those Gephi graphs, you can actually zoom in and pan out and explore what the actual words are in those nodes. Do
you do it? And when do you, do you have a set time every day that you do it, or do you do it once a week, or how do you use it?
Well, actually, this is the first time that I've put these graphs together. I talked you guys into letting me speak about 2 months ago, and at that point, all of my data was still in emails. So
okay, well, let me ask you a different question. Did you go back and look at that data in the emails? Like, did you use that email archive?
I didn't when it was an email. I had
so
this
was it
idea,
kind of write once, read never?
It was kind of, I had this idea that one day I'd be able to export it very seamlessly and it would take no time, and that just didn't happen.
Great. I think it's good to ask that. I think there's a lot of data gathering and tracking that is being done in a kind of hope that it will be transformed into something meaningful, and then that's an interesting moment. Like, how do you get it from the archive into your life?
Yeah.
But let's take some questions here and then here.
Yeah, I thought this was fascinating. Also, how you visualize it.
Thanks.
So last year there was a talk about this idea journal, and I think it was Mark Carranza, and he said that 80% of his thoughts or 75% of his thoughts were recurring, and what's that?
They don't recur.
Oh, they don't recur? Yeah, they are unique, but some part is recurring. So have you have you seen recurring thoughts or like things that are completely unique and things that come back, maybe that are in your mind?
Well, there are topics that occur quite frequently, like that big blue dot is science, and it's by far the most popular used tag. But you can extract n-grams from this type of information. You can actually, since this data has a date assigned to it, you can run time series, so you can see when new ideas pop up. I don't know how to do that yet. It's one of the reasons I want to give this talk is because I need you guys' help to think about how to do this. But I think that is one of the things that I would be really interested in doing, is looking at how phrases, new vocabulary emerge and integrate into my idea network. And possibly you could see a new node coming up with little side nodes, and then suddenly pop a new idea, something that you've done that you've never done before.
Joe. And then Mark after Joe.
Okay, so writing down ideas and recording ideas, cool idea. Did you write down that idea? So I did that for a couple of years also, and one of the things that I wrestled with was what's the definition of an idea? I mean, is the idea of having one more almond is not something that I decided to write down, but it's smaller than the idea of like, well, I'm going to get up here and ask you a question, and then there's this, it's like this sort of fractal data set of like, oh, there's the idea of my life. And then there's a whole spectrum in between. So for me, I put them in a spreadsheet, which was a slight pain in the ass. And so opening that up and finding the right place to it created a threshold of effort for me to actually write down an idea. So that was kind of the definition of the idea. Is it worth doing that for? But I just wondered if you had any thought of what defines a quote-unquote recordable idea for you.
Yeah, it would be interesting to differentiate the ideas that are that are coming from me versus coming to me, because it's everything that I've said to myself, and that includes things that I read, videos that I watch, as well as notes that I write or voice memos that I record. It would be very valuable, I think, to be able to differentiate that. Haven't done it yet, would like to.
Right,
so we have to hear from Mark, and just in case Mark doesn't describe it, he gave just a tremendous talk at the last conference that we then recapped at the closing, or one of the plenaries, in which he talked about his, 7 million plus link connections and some million plus idea archive. Why don't you say?
1.2 million at the time, now
ideas,
it's 1.5
and then how many
million.
links?
8 million.
8 million links, yeah.
And I'm interested in the rating that you use and how that influences that feeling of meaning that something has. And what is that feeling of meaning that leads you to rate something? And do you change the ratings? And
what's a 5 versus a 1? And
exactly.
Is a 3 today the same as a 3 tomorrow? And
that's one challenge, I guess, of the objectivity of this. A 1 is a to-do list. A 5 is
that's the most boring thing.
Yeah, right. A 5 is some kind of article or like an amazing scientific related Feynman interview from 1980s when I finally discovered those only very recently. Something that changed the way that I think is what a 5 would be, and I think that I need to work on the consistency, because what I did is I copied and pasted 770 entries out of email into a spreadsheet, and so after the fact I went through and weighted them with interestingness, and that's not reflected in Gephi. The interestingness is not, because I hadn't figured out how to do that yet. But you can do that, and it would be very interesting. Once I was able to actually even do the bar charts, it was curious to see how the interestingness changed what the most prevalent topics were. I mean, because ranging from peer-reviewed literature was by far the top in the weight of 4 of the most frequently used tags, whereas if I looked at 5, it was notes, which is my personal notes. And you can see these types of very distinct differentiations when you consider how important something was. And it's done just on personal preference on how valuable I think something was. 3 to me was neutral, 2 was not that important, 4 was important, something very memorable, and then 5 was blow your mind, my mind.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have time for one quick one. Carlos.
One of the coolest jobs that I ever had was I was an idea ninja. So my job was to kill some ideas. Have you looked at those ideas that were bad in retrospect of that was not a good idea?
I wish I'd never thought this.
Exactly, something like that.
That's a great question.
Yeah, so I have to make myself not do that when I'm reading my personal notes, because I try to not censor myself, But yeah, sometimes I'm like, why was I writing that? Oh my God. But yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.